How are you?
June 2026. Outside number 10 Downing Street, a Prime Minister stands at the podium and resigns. He doesn't resign because of any scandal. He doesn't resign because of any crime. He resigns because his party no longer believe in him. Why? Arguably, the substance of his policies were defensible, but the delivery of that substance never built trust. A lot of people didn't like him. His approval rating was minus 57. A lot of people found him bland, uninspiring. Almost nobody across the political spectrum would call him a gifted communicator. So that is the question we're asking today. If Keir Starmer had had a bit more charisma, a bit more presence, if he was better at influencing people, would he still be Prime Minister today? Welcome to the Power of Persuasion, a 3-part podcast where we will be firstly examining those 3 words: charisma, presence, and influence. What do they mean? In the second part, we will look at, can those things be coached? And then in the third part of the podcast, we'll look at who has them and who doesn't have those qualities, and why does any of this really matter? So, yes, you're familiar with your team here. Let's just quickly say hello and say which bit we're going to be doing. Ruth, what are you going to be talking about?
Yeah, hello. I am going to be talking about charisma, that magical thing that everyone's in search of, and what it is really, what makes it up, and what it looks like.
Brilliant. Then I'll do the presence bit, and then it's going to be Jan, isn't it?
It's going to be me, and I'm going to be talking about influence. We often talk about persuasion and influence almost in the same breath, and I am absolutely convinced that there is a difference, and that's what I want to explore.
Brilliant. And then it'll be Mikey talking about the coaching angle.
Yes, I will be talking about whether it's coachable or not. We all know from experience it is. But is it coachable across the board? Can everyone acquire sometimes those intangibles that add those charismatic qualities? And it's backed up by some fascinating research.
Excellent. And then it will be part 3. Boo, you're going to talk about who has it, who doesn't.
Yes, exactly that. Just having a look at some of those more obvious examples of people that, stand out because of charisma or presence or influence.
Brilliant. So if you are watching this, please do like, please do follow, please do subscribe. Very important, so that you can keep in touch with us as we put more and more of these wonderful podcasts out. So yeah, without further ado, let's talk about charisma, Ruth.
So charisma is something that is being talked about quite a lot at the moment. Like you said, people are talking about Keir Starmer's lack of charisma, why he didn't last at number 10, that being the reason that he didn't last at number 10, and the seemingly charismatic Andy Burnham looking poised to step in. So I wanted to look at what exactly charisma is, and why we think it matters, why it's so powerful, and if it actually is that important. So the word charisma has religious roots. It comes to us from Greek ecclesiastical Latin, and it means divine gift or grace. It's a trait that's actually very difficult to describe, but you know when somebody has it. It's just that kind of X factor, that thing that makes you go wow about somebody. But charisma is a really, really interesting communication skill, actually, because a lot of people misunderstand what it is. A lot of people think that charisma means being really loud, really charming, extroverted, or having this really big personality. But really, charisma is about emotional impact. It's the ability to make people feel something when you speak. It's that emotional connection. And that's what makes it different to presence. So I think presence is the weight that somebody has, how they command attention. whereas charisma is a person's magnetism. So they draw people towards them. People want to follow them. They make other people feel important, and they can really energize and influence as well. So I've done a bit of research into this, and experts have come up with what they think that charisma is. And according to them, it's a mix of three things: power, warmth, and presence. So power is that confidence, competence, decisiveness. They have complete certainty in their own ideas. Warmth is showing empathy, kindness, generosity, and presence is being fully engaged in the moment, you know, like listening, paying proper attention, and making other people feel heard. And it seems to be the balance of these three things that make a person truly charismatic. They seem to have the ability to make people believe anything, and they make you feel good when you're around them. And it's kind of like some of that charisma rubs off on you. It's sort of the influence that their charisma has on you. But someone having charisma doesn't mean that they're a good person. It doesn't mean they're a better person. It doesn't mean that they're good at their job. Some charismatic people have done really, really good things. Others have manipulated people and done catastrophically bad things. You know, there's been serial killers that have been described as charismatic. Ted Bundy, one example, he was apparently very, very charismatic. Or, you know, extreme cult leaders. They're often very charismatic people. They make people follow them. They make people believe in them. So charisma gives you greater influence, right? People want to follow you. They want to be around you. But it's down to you how you use that charisma, if you're lucky enough to have it. But charisma in the wrong hands, like a criminal or an inadequate politician, can actually be very, very dangerous, because people can be quite blinded by someone's charisma, and they can't see the damage that's being caused. So, you know, yeah, in terms of the Prime Minister, in terms of this whole Keir Starmer thing, I would say be very careful what you wish for when it comes to the Prime Minister and wanting someone really charismatic. Personally, I would prefer a leader who's a bit boring but very good at his job and has this genuine sense of public service, rather than a charismatic personality that covers up imperfections and inadequacies, you know. So but I think that's what makes charisma so interesting, really, because it's one of those traits that can be just as powerful in leaders and politicians as it can be in criminals and serial killers. But it is a very, very powerful and useful trait to possess, especially in business, especially as a leader, because if you can connect with people on that emotional level and gain that trust, then, well, really you can do anything, can't you?
Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah. And I suppose, like, you can have charisma and have substance as well. It's not just right. So,
Oh yeah,
so
of
that's what
course.
I guess we're hoping Andy Burnham then,
Yes, of
right?
course. But it's, yeah, I think it's quite interesting that, like I said about that charisma being quite blinding sometimes, because it's so attractive to people. People just want to be around it. They want to follow you. But sometimes people cannot see underlying problems because of it.
Yeah, they give a sense that all will be well, don't they? That in you know, when we feel charisma, someone has it. That's the feeling we get, that if we stick with you, we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's really interesting what you said about the cult leaders, because it's, you know, what is it that drags people into these impossible and tragic situations? You know, the crazy guy, Manson, and they were called his family because they were all so influenced by him. I mean, it's just incredible.
Yeah. But there's something that draws us to those sorts of people, isn't there? We want to be drawn to these sorts of people. We want to be inspired. So those people have a kind of magnetism.
But it's blinding as well. That's the problem.
Well, yeah, because if they're so sure and they're able to articulate themselves so well and give out this, you know, aura, right? But but yeah, fascinating. Thank you, Ruth. And of course, so when we're talking about charisma, I would say this is a real sort of outward quality, right? That you can you give it out there. People with charisma, it's coming out. Whereas if we talk about presence now, I would say that's more of a inner thing that we can possess, right? And of course, we'll talk about whether we can coach it or not a little bit later on. But there's an economist and author called Sylvia Ann Hewlett who did a lot of research on what presence is, and she broke it down into 3 areas. So she talked about, and there's a little bit of crossover with what you were saying there, Ruth, because she talked about gravitas, so how you act, um, communicate, so how you speak, and appearance, how you look. So the crossover with presence and charisma is very much in that gravitas, that how you act, because people with presence tend to be completely focused on what's happening, or on the something or on the someone. So they're not distracted by their phones or their to-do list, or they're just completely with you. And so you get this sense when you're with people who've got presence of a calmness, an inner stillness, right? So no distraction. And that's actually not easy in this day and age of distractions and notifications and all of that sort of thing, where we're constantly getting bombarded. But yeah, those people who display presence, you'll if you're on the receiving end of it, you just feel it, and you sense it, and again, so you're drawn to those sorts of people. The second one of those things, communication. So people with presence, I think that the biggest factor will be that sense of ownership, that sense of doing things, saying things on their terms. So someone with presence won't sound rushed or flustered. They won't be saying or they won't be sounding boring. They'll be succinct when they need to be. They'll expand when they need to be. When they need to expand, they'll be interesting. They have a range. But everything they do, everything they say sounds like they're doing it on their terms. And then the appearance, and we talked about this many times over the years, how people with presence, you can often tell them before they've even opened their mouth, right? It's just the way they're sat or the way they're stood. They're so comfortable in their skin. And that's equally true, by the way, online as well as face to face. You can get online presence, as we very often talk about. But yeah, it's just that sense. I often say, you walk past a room, you look into a meeting room, and you see someone speaking. You don't have to hear them to know. People are listening, right? They're commanding the room. They just have that sense about them, that presence. So, of course, why all of that matters? Well, I think as we're seeing, as we talk about with Keir Starmer, if we don't have that, then it's harder to get that relationship with people, harder to build that trust with people. If you don't have that, I think presence enables you, or enables us to feel like we're in the presence of someone who knows what they're doing and knows what they're saying, and we completely buy into it. And if it's missing, there's just that element of doubt.
I think that yeah, fascinating. I think one of the standout words there for me, it was almost like a throwaway word, was range. And it's that ability to, it's the appropriate expression of a range of emotion or thoughts, ideas. That's so critical, isn't it? That those people who just, when they speak, it feels absolutely appropriate to what they're trying to express. So if there is anger or real frustration, we feel that, we hear that, we see that. So and those who lack it can just seem that little bit one-leveled, can't they?
You don't get that emotional connection that Ruth was talking about, that emotional contagion, that picking up and putting yourself in the other person's shoes, that sort of thing that goes on. Yeah, absolutely.
But I think it's really what I always think of as the presence is if someone is really, and that lovely word of ownership or doing it on their terms, because when someone's considered and when you know they've given themselves that time to think about what's being said, it's almost like I don't then have to do it. You've done it for me. So it just empowers them. And it's such a simple thing to do, but how few people in this climate have that ability and that assuredness to be able to do it.
Yeah. And maybe if Starmer had had a bit more of that, then he'd have been given the benefit of the doubt more. As past prime ministers who made probably arguably worse decisions, or there were worse scandals, but survived longer, perhaps because they had those stronger communication skills and had been able to therefore get that benefit of the doubt, which Starmer really didn't have right from the beginning. Yeah, excellent. So, what about the influencing part of it, Jam?
Yeah, what about influence? Because often we talk about persuasion and influence as if they're sort of kind of one and the same thing, but I absolutely don't think they are. I mean, when we talk about persuasion and linking that to Keir Starmer, I mean, the chap was a barrister for goodness knows how many years. So I don't doubt his ability to persuade. I mean, if you look up skills required to be a barrister, one of the things it's going to tell you immediately is that you need good advocacy and persuasion skills. So yeah, I reckon he can persuade no problem. But what he hasn't got is what comes next. Persuasion requires something to be done to the other person. So something happens to me when you persuade me. But the key thing about influence is it's the next progression from that. So influence is about changing how people feel. Persuasion, it's often done with reason and logic, and it appeals to the head. The people that have great influence, they appeal to the heart. And when you appeal to somebody's heart, you change the way they feel, you change the way that they look at the world almost. And so that in turn has an impact on what they do, how they behave. And I think that's the bit that Keir Starmer is missing. He might be able to persuade, but he doesn't have great influence. If you think about the key people in your life who have had the greatest influence on you, teachers, parents, friends, whomever, I reckon that the best influencers, sometimes you don't even realize that they're doing anything. Going back to what Ruth said about that emotional contagion, that emotional transmission, there is just something about them. When you have contact with them, it changes the way you feel, it changes the way you see things, and that impacts your behavior. And I think there's different types of influence behavior. There's those energizers, the calmers, the connectors. Those energizers, and the only way I can describe it is those people that have oomph. When they walk into the room, the energy level in the room just rises. They've got such vitality, and there is just something about them that everybody just feels more energized. If you want a couple of examples, maybe I'm thinking of Michael McIntyre or Alison Hammond in the world of entertainment. But it doesn't have to be loud, and it doesn't have to be extrovert. Those calmers, the soothers, the ones that you're just around them and you know that you're in safe hands, everything's going to be all right. And immediately for me, Sir David Attenborough springs to mind. If the gorillas trusted him, then come on. Just something about him, cool, calm, collected. It's fine, everybody. And those connectors, the ones that are really good at making everybody else feel good about everybody else, if that makes sense. Graham Norton. Graham Norton for me immediately springs to mind. So he manages to make everybody feel okay. He manages to make everybody feel interesting and of interest to everybody. And I think that has real influence. All three of those influence behaviors have an impact on how I'm feeling, how I see the world around me. Influence changes environment. And that, as I say, in turn is going to change how I feel and what I do. And I suppose my analogy would be, imagine you're standing by a pond and you have a nice pebble in your hand. Throw the pebble into the pond. When it splashes, that's persuasion. Look at those ripples. That's influence.
What a nice analogy to leave us with there, Jen. Yes. Yeah. I love the bit you said about Keir Starmer. Like he can persuade, obviously, yes, but can he influence? And
Going back to what we were talking about earlier, I think the three are so interlinked. You know, did he have presence? Did he have charisma? You know, if you haven't got presence, if you haven't got charisma, how can you influence? And yeah, maybe lacking in all three of those areas was part of his downfall.
Interesting that very early on, John mentioned about with Starmer about him not being liked, and I think that's that's one of the simple keys for me. If people like you, they're open to be influenced by you, head or heart. If someone genuinely likes you, you're open to be taken along by them. Interesting.
or scared.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And in order to influence, you have to be open to influence.
Yeah, that's so it requires because you get those people who go to magic shows, don't you, or hypno shows, and they're the hypnotherapist parents are always very good at choosing the right people. They know the people, the type of person that will get is more likely to get hypnotized. And when it's the same with influencing, right?
Yeah. How can I have influence on other people if I am not open to influence?
Yeah.
Fascinating.
And you mentioned that sometimes we don't even realize it's happening. It can just it's a process, but we do, but we don't realize it's happening at the time.
I think that's really true that, sometimes with hindsight, you look back on something and you think, oh, crumbs. Oh, wow. Yeah, that person. At the time, I wasn't really aware of, what they were necessarily saying. And Boo, you often say this, don't you? People don't necessarily remember what you say, but boy, do they remember how you made them feel. Sometimes we need that bit of processing time. And you think, oh, crumbs, yeah, when I look back on that, wow. At the time, I wouldn't necessarily have been aware of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you, Jan. Well, look, I hope that's given you a lot of food for thought there. We've talked about what charisma is, what presence is, what influence is, and how important this is in relationships, in business, in leaders. In the next part, we will look at, can any of this be acquired? You aspiring leaders out there, can you acquire this? Can you be coached this? Join us for part 2.
How are you? So a butterfly in the morning. Just want